Modern-day cannibalism in America around Halloween. When we think of cannibalism in the United States, our minds often envision worst-case scenarios of survival, like the consumption of human meat as practiced by the Donner Party. While eating a deceased human being in order to prevent death by starvation may be viewed as a somewhat forgivable taboo, recent acts of cannibalism in America are much less justifiable and may develop into a horrifying addiction. We find it odd that a lot of this happened around Halloween. Hadden Clark was considered a misfit and neighborhood oddball from the onset of puberty. Known for cross-dressing in private from a relatively young age, he had few friends and trouble relating to his peers due in part to unpredictable mood swings and erratic behavior. So, when 6-year-old Michelle Dorr disappeared from her yard in 1986, it was quite surprising that Clark was not considered an immediate suspect, given his close proximity to the child on the day she vanished and his previous diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. It was only after Clark was arrested and charged with the murder of 23-year-old Laura Hodling in 1992 that authorities tied him to the disappearance of young Dorr. Clark had served as a handyman for Hodling's mother, a kindly religious woman who pitied the eccentric young man. It was Laura's distrust and fear of Clark that ultimately led her mother to discontinue his services. This enraged Mr. Clark and was the motive for his murder of Hodling. It would be years after the disappearance and murder of little Michelle Dorr that Clark revealed that he had consumed parts of the young girl's flesh and even bragged of making a keepsake necklace consisting entirely of the child's finger bones. Clark was sentenced to 30 years for the murder of Michelle Dorr and 30 years for the murder of Laura Hodling to be served consecutively. In a completely unrelated case, Hadden's older brother, Bradfield, was convicted in 1985 of strangling and dismembering a woman in California. An Egyptian-born former model, Omaima Nelson moved to the United States in the late 1980s in an effort to discover means to live a posh SoCal lifestyle. After relocating, she met William Nelson, a man 33 years her senior who had previously been convicted of smuggling marijuana. The couple married after just 2 months of dating. Though Mrs. Nelson claimed that she was sexually abused by her husband and suffered from battered spouse syndrome, it wasn't until 1991 that she sought her revenge: the murder, dismemberment, cooking, and cannibalization of William Nelson. These grisly acts, the 23-year-old Omaima claimed, were performed in accordance to various Egyptian beliefs regarding meeting her husband in the afterlife. As if the murder and dismemberment of William Nelson at the hands of his wife were not gruesome enough, details of exactly how his various body parts were cooked and disposed of are far more disturbing. During her trial, a psychiatrist testified that Mrs. Nelson admitted to cooking her husband's ribs barbecue-style before sampling them. Authorities also testified that Mr. Nelson's hands were fried in oil, as well as his head being boiled and stored in a freezer. Additional remains were put down the couple's garbage disposal, which neighbors said ran non-stop for hours following the murder. Omaima later denied cannibalizing her husband's remains. Omaima Nelson was convicted of second-degree murder and the assault of a former boyfriend with a gun. She is currently serving a sentence of 25 years to life. In July 2004, 25-year-old Mark Sappington was convicted on multiple criminal counts stemming from a PCP-fueled crime spree that occurred in April 2001. Sappington was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of acquaintances 25-year-old Terry Green, 22-year-old Michael Weaver Jr. and 16-year-old Alton Fred Brown Jr. He was also convicted of kidnapping and assault as a result of a carjacking gone awry. While the lives of Green and Weaver were clearly taken much too soon, it appears that it was the teenaged Brown who suffered the worst fate. According to Sappington, voices told him to consume flesh and blood or he would die. This led to the dismemberment and consumption of a portion of Brown's flesh. Sappington froze additional sections of the boy's remains for later consumption. Throughout the trial, Sappington's attorney claimed that mental illness rather than drug intoxication is to blame for her client's sudden violent outburst and sickening actions, as his mother was known to suffer from schizophrenia. Contrary to his attorney's claims, Sappington admitted on video to only hearing voices describing violent acts while he was high on PCP. Mark Sappington is currently serving 3 life sentences for the first-degree murder charges. He also received 6.5 years for the kidnapping charge and 2.5 years for assault related to the kidnapping. These sentences are to be served consecutively. At 79 years of age, it came as little surprise that Jiming Liu's health was slowly deteriorating. He and his wife, Yui Zhou, left China's Hunan province for the United States in November 2011 in order to live near their son, Yanang Zhou. Though Jiming Liu was never officially diagnosed with a degenerative condition such as dementia or Alzheimer's disease, Yui suspected such an ailment was affecting her husband and had confided in her son about his father's failing health and worsening mental state. The growing concerns surrounding Jiming's health caused Yanang to become a regular fixture at his parents' new home, checking in on his folks every day between 4:30 and 5 p.m. Yanang's daily visit to his parents' home on April 5, 2012, revealed a violent, gut-wrenching scene. The elderly Liu sat on a rocking chair, his body, including his face, smeared with blood. At his feet lay the body of 73-year-old Yui Zhou, face down and in a pool of blood. Upon realizing his son's presence, Liu began to repeat the phrase, "This is not your mother." Yui's left arm had been severed below the elbow. The detached section of arm was missing the majority of its flesh, as was the upper arm to the extent of bone being exposed. Severed fingers and blood stains were strewn about the home, as well as bits of flesh scattered near Yui's lifeless body. Due to the nature of the crime scene and Liu's appearance, prosecutors believed that the man had consumed some of his wife's remains. Liu was sent to Bridgewater State Hospital for an evaluation following his arraignment on April 6, 2012, the day after Yui Zhou's horrific murder. He was then transferred to Lemuel Shattuck Hospital and died on May 5, 2012, exactly 1 month after Yui's death. Liu's cause of death remains unknown. Dubbed the Causeway Cannibal, Rudy Eugene is at the center of a rather unique case. His victim, a 65-year-old homeless man named Ronald Popo, survived the brutal attack that involved his face being bitten, chewed, and disfigured. Naked and apparently bent on mayhem, Eugene encountered Mr. Popo on May 26, 2012, when the drifter was sleeping peacefully under the MacArthur Causeway in Miami. For reasons unknown, Eugene began beating the homeless man, rolling his body about on the ground and eventually removing Popo's pants. Eugene then began chewing on the helpless man, causing the removal of roughly 80% of the flesh on Ronald Popo's face. The seemingly random and outright vicious attack was only brought to an end when a police officer was forced to shoot and kill Eugene, who repeatedly refused to follow requests to stop attacking Popo. Rumors spread quickly that Eugene had been high on bath salts during the time of the attack, a synthetic amphetamine cocktail of sorts that has caused similar incidents of rage and destruction. But a full toxicology screen showed that the deceased attacker had none of the common ingredients associated with the production of bath salts in his system on May 26. In fact, the only drug in Eugene's system at the time of his death was marijuana. Autopsy results also failed to reveal the presence of human flesh in Rudy Eugene's stomach, though witnesses at the scene claim to have seen the 31-year-old swallow some of the flesh he chewed off of Popo's face. As for Ronald Popo, the 18-minute attack caused him to lose one eye and his nose, necessitating a number of extensive reconstructive surgeries. Joseph Albert Oberhansley is no rookie when it comes to crime, including murder. While living in Utah in 1998, Oberhansley killed his 17-year-old girlfriend, Sabrina Elder, and attempted to murder his own mother, critically injuring her instead. Elder had given birth to the man's child only days before her murder. In a plea deal, the killer was convicted of manslaughter and attempted murder for the incident. He served just 12 years before being granted parole in 2012. Shortly after being paroled, Oberhansley moved to Jeffersonville, Indiana. There he met Tammy Jo Blanton, a woman that supported and stood by him despite his ongoing criminal activity. In 2013, Oberhansley was arrested for strangling a fellow bar patron and resisting arrest. July 2014 led to yet another arrest due to Oberhansley's erratic driving, causing a slow-speed police chase. Tammy Jo Blanton posted his bail in both incidents, describing herself as his fiancée during one of the felon's many court hearings. During the early morning hours of September 11, 2014, the dysfunctional couple's relationship took a turn for the worst. Blanton had changed the locks on her house in an effort to keep Oberhansley out, leading her to call the police when the angered man attempted to get inside the home. He was told to leave by the responding officers, though he was not arrested for the incident. By the late morning hours of September 11, co-workers became concerned with Blanton's absence and asked police to check up on her. The woman's mutilated body was soon discovered in the bathtub of her home, covered with a tarp. Blanton, 46, had suffered multiple stab wounds. Her skull and chest had been cut open, with the majority of her heart, sections of her lungs, and a large portion of her brain all missing. Investigators discovered further evidence of the nature of the crime: bloody plates, pans, and utensils located in the kitchen. Still inside the home when officers arrived, Oberhansley eventually admitted to cooking a section of Tammy Jo Blanton's brain and eating it, as well as consuming pieces of her heart and lungs. Oberhansley is currently being held without bond. His trial was previously set to begin on February 6, 2015. Stay paranoid, my friends.